here you go.
Welcome, everybody. We are just entering our third Zoom sessions, and we welcome you to this series. And it's focused on our proposed updates to the City of Yachats Title IX Land Use Code. Today, we'll discuss duplexes in the R zones with our Planning Commissioner Chair, Mark Sakamoto. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you've been along for the ride so far, thank you for participating and in your engagement. Past Zoom sessions are available at the city's website and the city's YouTube page. Today, we'll start with an overview from our city planner, Catherine Gunther, and planning chair, Mark Sakamoto, on the duplexes in the R zones. From there, we do have some unanswered questions that we gathered at the July 14th meeting that we could touch on, as well as sentiments that were collected from each station, and this station particularly on duplexes. And then we will open the floor for conversation. And when we do that, just make sure to raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you. We just ask that we keep the space respectful and we stay topic specific. Mark, go ahead and take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Before we get started with the questions, I wanted to touch on a subject that that has been discussed before, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear about it. And it has to do with CC&Rs and building heights. There is a opinion from the city attorney regarding the recent state laws, and I think part of the confusion that's been circulating is because the law has changed recently. So I just wanted to bring everybody up to date with what the impact to Yachats is with the recent laws. So the bottom line really is that how building heights are calculated or restricted within the city limits has not really changed. As it has in the past, the first take on building heights falls to CC&Rs or deed restrictions. If you on your particular property, there is a restriction for height of the building, that takes precedence over anything the city has. Once you get, if your property does not have any restrictions, then it falls to the city limit of 30 feet. And there is a very involved calculation for building height within the city code if you want to look at it. But basically, if you're on flat land, it's 30 feet from the ground level to the peak of the building, which in most cases ends up being a two-story house. So, and that does not change. There are only differences now with height is that we have some new types of buildings that were put in the draft for inclusion in the code, ADUs and cottage clusters. Those have height limits on their own. The ADUs, for instance, is 15 feet. I believe cottage clusters are 24 feet. But of course, if you happen to live in a neighborhood that has a CC&R that has a height limit of, let's say, 15 feet, then if there were cottage clusters or a duplex put in that neighborhood, it could not be above 15 feet. So essentially, nothing really has changed as far as how building heights are applied on your particular property. And with that, I'm more than ready to go ahead answering questions unless, Catherine, you
Let's
have
see
something
if
you want to
Catherine
add?
wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add, if there is any violation of those deeded height restrictions, the city doesn't have any role in that. That basically we can only review and approve of building permit applications based on our municipal code. But so if somebody says, I want to build higher than my private deed restrictions allow, the city uh, doesn't have a role in that. We have to prove that based on the city code, but then the recourse for the neighbors is civil. They can sue. And there have been some cases of successful civil suits where the CCNRs have been upheld. So none of that's changed. I think people are just sort of getting a sense of how that works now. So that's probably a good thing.
Okay, so
Okay.
quick kind of recap there. If you have CCRs in your neighborhood, they, with the new code or with the new state law, if our city allowed ADUs and duplexes, those CCNRs could not stop ADUs or multifamily housing for being built in that neighborhood. They still can hold a height restriction. This state law does not have anything to do with height specifications. Just to kind of wrap that up. Is that
Yeah.
in
That's
agreement with you
that's
two?
good,
Yeah.
Bobby.
Mhm.
Basically, if your CCNRs are more restrictive when it comes to density than the local code, then the local code takes precedent. The state has not made that same ruling on building height. So CCNRs that are more restrictive on density can't be upheld. If they're more restrictive on height, they still stand.
Okay. So one thing I think is really important to line out in this also is that never and into the future has the city ever had any jurisdiction over private deed restrictions. That is for those neighborhoods to uphold. That is not for the city to uphold. Would you like to add on to that?
Uh, no, I think that's pretty clear. Uh, I think I lost you, Bobby. I'm
Oh,
not
there
hearing
we go.
you.
Okay.
There you go. Okay.
Catherine, would you like to give a little bit of a overview on the proposal in the code for duplexes being introduced into the R1 zone?
Yeah, so that's the biggest change. Our code has always allowed for duplexes in the R2 through C1 zones. So it's not a new concept to us, unlike some of the other building types being proposed. The big difference is that the draft proposes to allow duplexes in what has traditionally been what we used to call single-family residential zones. So in the zones where prior to this, only one dwelling unit per lot. This is one of the topics that probably had the most enthusiastic conversation so far in our public engagement meetings, in planning commission meetings. I
Okay.
think we're going to have a lot of discussion about this going forward um, because it seems to be one of the changes that people feel is perhaps the most impactful. So again, not a new concept to us. What's new is introducing it into a lower density residential zone. In the other zones where it has been allowed in the past, there are some less significant changes in basically reducing the land area required per unit. But that probably would not be as impactful. The other hot topic around duplexes is parking. Right now, our code requires two parking
You ready?
spaces for each unit in a duplex. So four off-street parking spaces for a duplex. The current draft proposes reducing that to three, and that's something else that has generated a lot of conversation. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay. Um, maybe this might be a good time just because I know this will come up, is what the logic was behind uh, allowing duplexes in R1. Um, and again, a little bit of background. The idea behind the changes to the ordinances is to allow for the building of more middle housing. That is ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, et cetera. Because historically within the city, there have not been any apartment buildings built in the city since at least the 2000. And that has left a significant shortage in that kind of housing. And so to provide that kind of housing, we needed to uh, lower some of the barriers to encourage current property owners to make some types of housing available that currently aren't. So the challenge comes in that in several ways. First of all, 70% approximately 60 to 70% of the lots in the city are R1, and the balance being R2, 3, and 4. So currently, the only place you could build a duplex would be on an R2, 3, or 4. But the next challenge is that, again, historically, most of what's being built on those lots in R2, 3, and 4 are single dwelling units, houses. And there's been very little building outside of that. So right now, the only land that we have that could theoretically be used for duplexes is being used up, being used for building regular houses. So it's a smaller portion of the land is available, and that land is being used up to build houses. So to make room for that kind of middle housing, the only land really, as a practical matter, that's left to increase that availability would be to start using the analysis.
Did Mark freeze for you guys?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here.
Okay.
Neil, do you want to
We
help
need
Mark maybe get on the on the
about
city network?
roughly.
Okay, go ahead, Catherine. I muted Mark while he's freezing. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Apologies. I think he's on the guest network, and we may be taxing that with a busy time of year. So I think Neil's going to quick switch Mark over to a secured network, so he'll have a little more bandwidth there. I don't know if you want to take a question in the meantime. I don't want to. Mark's doing a great job of sort of explaining some of what led us to this. Most significantly, that our higher density residential zones have historically not been used for anything other than single dwelling units. So I'll take our R4 zone, which is our highest density residential zone, was intended for multiplexes and has been consumed. In the last 20 years, we haven't built a single multi-unit project in an R4 zone. So that's why some of the focus now for higher density falls on the R1, because that's what we're swimming in right now. Of our undeveloped or underdeveloped land right now, we're real heavy on the R1. And hopefully, I saw Neil step away. We'll see if we got poor Mark back with nothing but the best here for our guests in City Hall. My apologies for that.
Mark, are you ready to jump back in? Oh, you're muted. Well, when we see his mute come
There we
off,
go.
oh, there it is.
Okay, I'm
Back in
back.
business.
I'm back. Sorry. Um, so I'm not sure where you guys lost me. So I don't know how much of my speech came through.
You ended off kind of at the higher zoned lands like R2, R3, and R4 being used mostly for single family or detached single units, as
Okay.
we refer to them
Okay.
now. And then Catherine jumped in a little bit to fill in there. So if we want, we could go to some questions
Okay.
live from the
Okay.
Zoom audience. And then if there's ever any moment where we're not having questions, I do have a pretty big list of questions that were gathered from July 14th that went unanswered, though I'm happy to read off. So let's, if we see a hand raise up, we will call on you. In the meantime, oh, there's Stacy Rosenberg. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Stacy, and we'd like to hear from you.
Okay, so I have two questions. I'll try to be quick. The first one is I talked to each of the three of you about whether you could have a duplex and an ADU in an R2, and I received different answers from each of you. And the latest was that you're working on it, and I'm wondering, have you actually established in the document itself whether in an R2 you can have a duplex and an ADU even on those smaller 6,000 square foot lots?
Um,
Stacy,
Go
oh,
on.
sorry. Stacey, I'm going to jump on this really quick. I accidentally muted you. I meant to unmute myself, but I hit yours. So you're welcome to unmute yourself again. But I'm going to jump in on this a little bit. Our staff and the Planning Commission have been just completed 7 line by line reviews of the code as a whole, and our next step is to meet and review each of the comments and takeaways from that line by line review. So our next step is to look at each of those things that have been brought up and discussed throughout the process, and have a discussion on, is this going to stay like this, or are we going to make further clarification? That is one of the things that is going to come up for further discussion, is clarifications on no duplexes or and ADUs together. Is that both of your guys' understanding as well, Mark and Catherine? So
Um, yeah, yeah, it is kind of a little tricky because we are dealing with a draft, and we have made some changes to the draft as we're going along that pretty much everybody agrees that, this will or will not work. But yeah, I think we are getting to the point now, finally, that we're actually going to start going through and discussing some of the more um, uh, open issues and try to nail those down. And yeah, I think that's one of them is are we going to have ADUs and duplexes on the same
mhm.
property?
Can I just one quick,
Yeah.
our current code allows for duplexes in the R2, but requires a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet. So we have a lot of lots that are zoned R2, but they're smaller than that 7,500 square feet, so they can't support a second unit. Aqua Vista comes to mind. Um, so the proposed change is to reduce that minimum lot size to 6,000 square feet for duplex in the R2. So that would open some existing lots up to the possibility of having a second unit. The current draft does not allow an ADU with any housing type other than single dwelling unit. So a duplex or a triplex, you wouldn't be able to have a duplex with each side of the duplex having an ADU, or duplex somehow sharing an ADU. So it's you pick one or the other, but you can't do a combination of the two.
And that's something we need to make more clear in this edit version.
Does that answer your question, Stacy?
Yes, that answers it. And if I could just jump to my second one, is just one of the things that I've been looking for is really an assessment of the pros and cons and of different elements of the housing changes. And in regard specifically to duplexes and the potential for increased density, it would be really valuable to have a table or information of what would be the maximum density for the different neighborhoods. So I live in Aqua Vista. What would be the maximum amount of housing units if there's 37 lots, and each one either has a duplex or an ADU, or some of us might be allowed to have triplexes. What would be the maximum number of housing units? That would be really valuable for us to be able, as citizens, to know what the potential build out could be. And I think that would be very helpful.
If
Go
if I
on, go
can,
on.
yeah, that's just it's a tough thing to do because there are so many variables. For example, one of the things that's come up on Aqua Vista, what if somebody buys two adjacent properties, combines them, tears down the existing homes, and then somehow they have this larger landmass to work with? I'd be happy to come up with a sort of best approximation, but it's really hard to say definitively this is all that would ever happen. But I've done this for some people who are interested in what the potential is on their own lot, or concerned about what the potential is on a neighbor's lot. But to do an entire neighborhood becomes kind of challenging. I could certainly come up with a range, but maybe we could take representative neighborhoods. I couldn't do it for every lot in town, or I wouldn't get any other work done. But we could sort of take a couple of different representative neighborhoods and give people an idea.
And to look at that question from a different perspective, because there are a lot of questions about how much is the city going to change as a result of these code updates? Um, in discussions with both Cascadia partners, and I know Bobby has talked to uh, city managers and city governments in various cities, and from what I've been able to research and look up online, uh, the kind of level of changes that we're talking about is something in the neighborhood of most cities experience a 2 to 3% adoption rate, which means that 2 to 3% of the lots in the city end up adopting some portion of the code, that is, build an ADU or a duplex. And to put a number to this, we're projecting in 20 years that there'll be approximately 1,050 building units within the city. And of those, we're looking at probably, if we say 3%, we're talking 30 units. So we're talking in the next 20 years, adding 20 to 30 units that would be conformed to the new code. Everything else would look the way it would have looked had we not made any changes at all. Or to put it another way, 97 in 20 years from now, 97 to 98% of the city will look the way it would have looked had we not made any change at all. So the impact in terms of neighborhoods and the city is not quite as drastic as some people might fear. We've been very conscious in working on the draft initially to make sure that we made the smallest changes we could while still encouraging the kind of middle housing that we were looking for. So the way I explain it is that we're doing modest incremental changes to achieve modest and incremental results. So again, we're looking at 20 to 30 units, maybe 40 to 60 people that will be living in units of middle housing in the next 20 years. So that's the kind of scale we're looking at.
Mark, real quick, I'm gonna interrupt. I see Sue May has her hand raised. Sue,
Okay.
would you like to go ahead and give your question?
I just had a question slash comment, Mark, not to be disrespectful, but I don't believe that. I think that once you make these changes into the code, you have no ability to control how fast they go. Every site that can have an ADU can have an ADU. There's no control, there's no stopping it. That might be, you might want to say what you're saying, and you may want to make everybody feel comfortable with that. But that's like saying that the speed limit's going to be 55, but I promise you that only 20% of the people will want to go that fast because they're not that kind of driver. And that's just not reasonable. That's all.
Um,
Well,
Maybe Catherine, you could add something to this with the kind of what you see with the amount of lots that are available because we have the size requirements. So, like, what percentage of lots have space to build an ADU or a duplex might be a good answer to that comment question.
Yeah, I wish I could say precisely how many. I have not gone lot by lot. The thing that most people run up against, it's not the setbacks. We've heard a lot of talk about setbacks. That's not really what's constraining any additional development on most people's lots. It's the lot coverage. And particularly in the R1 zone where you're allowed to cover 30% of the lot with any structure. So that's your home, your garage, whether it's attached or detached, any decks that are more than 8 inches off the ground, that 30% goes pretty quickly. So that doesn't leave people with a lot of room to build an ADU. One of the things that's proposed in the draft is to allow an additional 10% lot coverage in those residential zones strictly for the purpose of building to a higher density. So if you're still just going to build a single dwelling unit in the R1 zone, for example, you'd be limited to that 30%. If you were doing a single dwelling unit plus an ADU, you would have 40% lot coverage. But most people don't have anything else to play with. As far as how many people might take advantage of this, yeah, I don't. I'm not going to pretend to know. It seems like any data that people point to, the response is, yeah, but we're not like fill in the blank, whatever the city is that is being referred to. So Mark is absolutely right that the data suggests that a small percentage of the people in any city we've studied take advantage of this higher density option, but we don't know because we haven't tested it in Yahats yet.
Yeah, because I am not aware of any city in Oregon that has had more than a 3% uh, adoption rate when they increase the density. Um, Now, and I am not aware of any city that has had an influx of development or a higher rate of development once they change their zoning codes. If there is somebody out there that you know of that has had some sort of experience like that, we'd very much like to know who that is because we'd like to talk to them and learn from their experience. But at this point, um, everything that we've looked at, everybody we've talked to, every piece of research that I've and others have been able to find all point to the percentages being around 2 to 3% adoption rate. The highest rate that I've ever found anywhere in the country was there was a city in, I want to say Illinois, that got to 4%. And they got the 4% by basically adding all kinds of incentives to build ADUs. And it was this very large incentive program to build ADUs, and they got it up to 4%. We don't
So
have anything like that at all in this city. So I'm very, very comfortable that we will be in the 2 to 3% range like everybody else is.
hey, Mark, we have a few more hands up
Sure.
for additional questions. Lauren Castellino was the next to raise her hand. And after that, we have a couple more.
Okay.
hmm Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, thank you. Well, I get very excited by the idea of actual information, like, for instance, what was requested, I think, by Stacy Catherine, that you could actually look at a residential area and show what the potential, zoning, what it could look like if it was actually used into its max. And I don't know. I find, Mark, I would love to see where your impressions and your data are coming from. And I was sent an article by you, Bobby, that said that there was a 26% uptake rate on ADUs in Portland when they changed their code. So it's very hard for me to hear what you're saying, Mark, and kind of like,
I had heard that too, and I checked and what I read was 2.2%. So I've got it. I heard that as well from somebody that it was 26%, and that's not what I read. So I'm gonna have to do some more research. And actually, I was thinking this morning of maybe coming up with a bibliography of all the studies and different sorts of literature that we've been looking at, and just put that out there so people can look at what we've been looking at. There's a variety of studies in a variety of places. There's actually a couple of very extensive studies by PSU on Portland's experience with increasing density. And in some ways, Portland is a good example for some things than not. But in any case, there's some pretty extensive studies, and there's studies in other places too. But that's basically yeah, that 26%. I was surprised when I heard that. I'm going to have to do some more research.
Mark, that was sent to her by a past planning commission member, and I'm happy to send that to you for
Okay.
your studying and take a look
Okay.
at that.
Okay.
Let's move on to the next question, and hand raised by Catherine's iPhone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to go back to the CCNR piece, if we can. And I'm not sure if how this impacts or does not impact building height, but if ORS 93.277 says that CCR's regulations are not enforceable if they only allow for single dwelling units, but do not allow for ADUs and middle housing. So it sounds to me like if those CCNRs do not allow for ADUs or middle housing, then none of their rules can apply.
Can I jump
Yeah,
on
go
this
ahead.
one? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so as of now, and this is subject to change without notice, the state has only ruled in on density. So their goal is to remove barriers to housing production. So far, they have not seen a height limitation as a barrier to housing production. Now, it's easy to imagine that could happen in the future. That if they say, well, wait a minute, this neighborhood that's restricted to 15 feet instead of the city-wide maximum of 30 feet can literally only build half as much house. But so far, that has not been the focus. So it's only density. And that, again, the city has no role in. But so if you live in a neighborhood where there's a deed restriction that says single family residence only, and that's what it's going to say, but the city allows for a single dwelling unit plus an ADU, that's old deed restriction is just no longer enforceable. But height so far, it remains untouched. Does that help at all, Catherine?
So if they do not allow ADUs and middle housing, would the height restrictions still apply if everything else does not?
Oh, I see what you mean. No. So nullifying one does not nullify the others. So we saw this, for example, there were a lot of CCNRs in the 50s that violate all kinds of federal law. We had some here in Yachats. So to say those things that restrict a certain neighborhood to a particular race, and Ocean Crest was one of them. Those nullifying those because it's a violation of law did not make the height restriction go away, right? So
Okay.
does that do it? Yeah. So you can uh nullify one and have no impact on the others.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep us going here in order. Sue, I did see your hand pop up again. Did you have another comment or question? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next, and I just didn't want to have her be skipped if she had something to say. Next up is Stacy Rosenberg again. Go ahead, Stacy.
So just to make one last comment, for one of my concerns on the CCRs and deeds is that by allowing, the state has made changes, the city, is not changing anything on the height, but it does mean that there's likely to be developers who will take advantage and there will be lawsuits. The law just went into effect for some things on like July 1st. And there's already lawsuits in West Lynn on density and other issues. And so we're likely to see a lot of lawsuits on this, and maybe Yachats should not be at the forefront of figuring out whether height limits are going to be affected by this new law or not, but that it's definitely a combination of between the city's efforts for middle housing and the state regulations that are going to motivate some developers to try and exceed height limits in areas that have deeds. But my other question had to do with, I know that you're looking for data on what happens to coastal communities that face these types of changes in zoning. You might want to look at some of the coastal communities in California. My concern with a lot of the data that's being used in Oregon is that it does not affect a community like Yachats that has to deal with lots of vacation rentals and ocean views. So, a lot of the communities that Cascadia used for research are not communities that have ocean views. They're not communities that have lots of vacation rentals. And therefore, when you say there's lots of data to support small growth, there really is no evidence. And that is one of the uncertainties. And for the city to come out and say, we don't know how much will actually grow because we don't. We have very specific circumstances. But if you look at Santa Cruz and you look at Santa Barbara and some of those coastal communities in California that have seen huge growth, you might see that that might be where Yachats could be leading, depending. But that was just a question for me is, have you looked at any of those coastal communities and seen how their growth evolved?
No. The simple question, the answer to the question is no. We have not looked at California. Uh, Part of the reason why I would be reluctant, and I grew up in California, Southern California, is the kind of growth that especially the coastal areas have seen over the last 30 or 40 years it is nothing short of astounding. I don't know any other word to put it. It's just on a completely different scale, having nothing really to do with density, really changes in density, as much as it has to do with just land values in general and the amount of money that's pouring into those areas. The values that and the growth that you've seen in those areas is more of the kind of growth that California has seen in the past. Only it was focused. If you focus on the coast, it's even more so. But that when reading studies about especially large cities and trying to compare them to smaller cities, it's really difficult to do because there's so many factors that apply in a large city that may not apply to a smaller city. Large cities like Los Angeles or San Diego or Santa Barbara, there are significant communities where land values and densities vary a great deal. That's not really the case in Yachats. So one of the problems with data from those large cities is that if you start looking at density in one part of the city changing, well, that may not be reflected in another part of the city, or there may be a reason why one particular part of the city where the land values were depressed and something happens, mass transit, a freeway goes in, a factory is built, and suddenly land values and density increases. So it's hard to draw a lot of inferences from studies from large cities. And the ones I've read for large cities, the authors even say that, is that they struggle with trying to eliminate all these other factors that could affect land values and density outside of just zoning code changes. But yeah, we can look at places like Santa. I went to school in Santa Barbara, and the city has changed a lot, but I don't think that has to do with zoning or density changes as much as it has just that its land values have increased. And Santa Barbara has become a very attractive place to live because of celebrities that have moved there and et cetera. And it has changed a lot, but I don't think all of it can be attributed to simply zoning code changes.
Thanks, Mark. We'll go ahead and go to our next person with a hand raised, and that's Lauren Castellino. Go ahead, Lauren.
So I couldn't agree more that it's hard to make inferences, Mark, from these things. And that's actually one of the things I've been yearning for. It seems to me like Yachats is small enough and unique enough that we could actually be going, okay, how do we believe this will affect our town if we do this or that? And that's the kind of conversation and kind of like meta view rather than the line by line reading that I've been hoping to see occurring in the Planning Commission and haven't. And Mark, you said some version of we're trying to make kind of modest changes. And honestly, before I got on Zoom today, the question I most wanted to ask is why are you doing what seems like almost everything possible, all of you, to allow for the greatest density possible in the urban growth area, outpacing even Portland in terms of allowing for 1,000 square foot ADUs rather than their limit of 800 square feet. And it's like every metric you look at, it seems to me like you're trying to make it possible for the greatest density. You're reducing the lot size to make buildings. You're increasing the amount of the lot that can be covered on that smaller lot size. You're reducing the places of off-street parking. You're reducing the setbacks. It's like, we could just keep talking about like I don't know what other levers you would even have to create greater density possibilities than what you're doing. So how is it modest change?
If you look at the housing implementation plan document that Cascadia Partners provided us, and look at all the strategies they laid out in there, the possible strategies, um, and that's what I mean by we didn't take almost we took very few of the strategies they provided. We tried to limit it as much as we can. And certainly the draft as it exists is not the end of it. I mean, that's basically Cascadia Partners took our input from both the community and from the Project Management and Advisory Council and put out that document. We will probably change it, and in particular, the 1,000-foot ADU. Um, I don't want to speak for anybody else on the planning commission, but that will probably change. But if you look at the strategies in other cities like Portland or Ashland have used to increase density, to reduce barriers for ADUs, our changes are modest. Um,
Well, I would
and not
love
everything.
verifying information because, in fact, like you're saying that, but I would like the proof of that because I have, in fact, looked at those and like I see Ashland doing some interesting things that I would love it if you were all considering. Like when they're allowing ADUs, they're making it so that you can't create like a shadow line from the north for neighbors. Things that actually protect the situation while making it possible for more housing. And that is what I'm not seeing happen so far in how this code is written. And that's the kind of code I could get behind supporting.
Okay,
Could I jump in real quick?
sure.
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how a host raises his or her hand. It's law. Anyway, couple things just to give an example of what Mark's talking about, some of the things that were sort of uh, rejected outright. One way that some cities are handling this is to require that people build to a minimum density. And we rejected that kind of right off the hand, I mean, off the bat. That if you had a lot that could host 3 units, you would be required to build those 3 units. Now, that did not sound like something we wanted, like a path we wanted to go down. So there certainly are, Lauren, you asked, what could we have done that would be more drastic? Well, there's one. That's a big one. And I don't think we need to do that. I don't think anybody entertained that for even a second. I like that some of the things that Ashland is doing. I'm glad some of those are agreeable. I'll tell you one of the radical things that Ashland did. They entirely did away with their off-street parking requirements. They just sort of said, you neighborhoods, figure it out yourselves. If people can't find a place to park, then I guess they won't own a car. So again, that's something that we're not even discussing. There's been a proposal to reduce off-street parking requirements for duplex from two cars per unit to 1.5, and that's the most radical change in our off-street parking requirements. So there's a lot that was left on the table, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and it may still feel like there's a whole lot going on, but um, there are a lot of things we just ruled out right from the get-go.
And there
Yeah,
might still be things to get ruled out.
yeah.
For example, discussing the size being 800 or 900 square feet, something different than what we have in our proposal. Also, things that are in our proposal that are being weighed right now are even duplexes. I mean, that's being weighed. All of these things are being weighed out right now by these commissioners that are having these conversations through this review, and it's about to get go even further in depth with those conversations. Yet we have to just this is a whole process. It's a long process, and hearing from you guys, it adds to this process. And you mentioned Ashland. We're looking at all of their ADU guidelines because we do really like what they have done. And how can we apply that to ours? Those are conversations we are having, and that we're about to continue getting more and more in depth with them every time. So I think I'm going to take it to the next question here. And it looks like we have Sue May with a hand up.
Things I would like to have you guys compared to another 1,000 population city. Find us one and compare it to that. And the other thing I'd really like to have an answer to, and I've never heard an answer to it. It showed in the attorney's report. Cascadia Partners have said it. It's coming back time and time again. We are a small city of 1,000. In 20 years, we will never hit 2,500 people. We do not need to do these density changes or these middle income changes. Smart people decided that we are too small to take on this kind of responsibility. But you guys have never said anything about that. It's never come back from the Planning Commission that I've listened to every single work session. You've never brought that out, and folks have never been able to comment about it. We just don't fit. And everything that you're pointing at is not 1,000 population beach city, knowing that density is going to increase a lot quicker than you think because the whole world wants to live at water. So I'd like to know why, or the answer to we're the 1,000 population people and we don't need to do this, won't need to do this in 20 years. That's 150% of our current population to get to 2,500 people. But why are we doing this? Just why?
Okay.
Catherine or Mark, do you want to jump in? And then I do have the population threshold thing comparison
Actually,
to that.
in that last community meeting that we had, Craig kind of addressed that because somebody asked that question, and why if you know if we're under 2,500, why are we even looking at this? Isn't the fact that the state has said it's 2,500 and above means that cities under 1,000 don't really need to worry about it? His point was that the reason why the state set that limit was that they wanted to give cities that size the option to implement these changes based on the resources they had available to do the work to create these kinds of changes to their zoning ordinances. Most cities of that size don't under that 2,500 don't necessarily have the resources and staffing, et cetera, to do that. And I would include Yachats in that. But we were fortunate enough that the state gave a grant to Cascadia Partners to do the work to determine what the housing needs would be for the city and to determine where we might want to do, what the things we might want to do to try to address some of the shortages or shortfalls that they felt were going to appear. It's not a question of whether it's appropriate or not for the size of the city. It's a question of whether the city of that size has the resources. And a lot of cities don't. And fortunately, we were able to get a grant that provided those resources. So
you're telling me, and that's what the mayor said too. You're telling me that because we had the resources to get a grant, we should be making these huge zoning changes that were not required of our size because we have the resources to get a grant. And that is exactly what the mayor said at that meeting also. Said that most of the people at our size aren't doing it, but we are because we have the resources, which translates to me is we have a bunch of people that have time on their hands and are able to get money and we can get the study done. Now, that's not how I want my town to be dealt with these zoning changes. That's just my opinion.
Okay. The other thing that came up and that we heard a lot from the community and the community engagement meetings that we had was the question of workforce housing. And a lot of the community was interested in having the city do what it could to try to make more housing for workforce available. And the strategy to do that was through workforce for middle housing, that the middle housing availability would make workforce housing available. So that was the motivation behind looking at the middle housing, was the interest that the community had and employers had in workforce housing. So the way to try to address that was through middle housing. So that's part of the motivation behind it. Um, Again, the changes that we're implementing, the amount of change that we're anticipating is that 2 or 3%. I mean, that's what we're looking at, seeing what happen. And as far as the city growing, the city is going to grow. There are empty lots that are owned by private parties. They will probably be built on at some point.
And
Um,
they will be, and we will continue to grow. But we could certainly grow organically without these code changes.
we're
Why are
not.
people
I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, why are they not building duplexes? Why are they not doing those things when we have codes available already? Because that's not the nature of this community. And forcing it will only do changes that will not allow this community to grow organically and to become what's important.
We're not trying to make anybody do anything. We're just simply making options available to the property owners in the city. People has asked the city, can they build ADUs? City, and
And I'm just going to interrupt really quick here because we do have only 10 minutes or actually 8 minutes
okay.
left on the Zoom, and we have a very patient Susan with her hand up that I want to make sure she gets the time to ask some questions. And then we do have another person that hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet, I see with a hand up. So, Susan, go ahead and we'll try to get these questions in the last couple minutes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So I just want to follow up on what Sue had said, and just as a point of reference, we are in unprecedented times. If you look at a heat map today, the entire West Coast is hot, getting hotter, and this little corner of Oregon and Washington are a place that people are going to want to move. I lived in Arizona when all the Californians who couldn't afford to live in California started coming to Arizona, and we saw our housing market just double, literally doubled. So this is a nice small community. We have a limited amount of space within the city limits and infrastructure, and I think you can't compare us to other things that have happened. It's we're it's unprecedented what's happening now in the world and with climate change. And I hate to see this unique little piece of the Oregon coast get inundated with too much development. That's it.
Thank you,
Okay.
Susan. Mark, do you have anything to say, or Catherine? And then if not, I can go to the next person since we have just a few minutes left.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm
Except one
going
thing,
with,
I agree with Susan. I don't want to see this place change drastically either. You know, I live here too. I and but there's also a need for this kind of housing, and we're trying to find some modest things to try to lower barriers so that property owners can have the flexibility to build this kind of housing, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Nicole, I see your hand up and you haven't had a chance to chime in yet. So let's go with you next.
Okay. Um, well, thank you to everyone who's been working on this. We moved here from Portland when they were implementing the zoning changes. So I lived in North Portland, and right next in a single family dwelling, and right next door to us in North Portland, it became a townhouse with two ADUs in the back. In our little neighborhood, because there was, no parking requirements, I watched people that had lived there for generations, elderly people, no longer be able to park in front of their home. So, I mean, of course, it's a little triggering when I have this lived experience. But another thing that I saw happen were good intentions to create workforce housing or middle housing or whatever we want to call it. But these ADUs that were built by developers, were built by people that own the lots, single family homes torn down, and they were rented at market values. And unfortunately, the market value did not equal what a workforce could pay. I mean, so we saw tech executives coming into these neighborhoods and all of that. So I think we need to be careful when we're talking about there's a lot of good-hearted people that live here, and of course we want to have housing for all, but it's not quite accurate or truthful when we're speaking about this, because anyone that builds one, most people are going to need to get an ROI, a return on their investment, and that's just not going to be what folks that live here in town can afford, and they'd be the first to tell you that as well. So I think I just don't know that we're handling this the right way, and that perhaps some of the changes in the code that need to be done without all of this density might solve some of these issues, and maybe just take some time with this to really explore, to look at like what other cities have done that have gotten creative. But yeah, that's kind of, it was more of a comment. So thank you for.
Nicole, with your experience, do you have any suggestions for our team that is thoughtfully looking at all of this and wanting to hear experience?
Well, I think what my lived experience was is that parking became really difficult because there was, where one had stood, there were now, four plus, and if you have roommates. And so who I saw suffer were people that didn't have, like in this North Portland neighborhood, was folks that were either handicapped, older, that needed to park in front of their home. That I saw suffer. And then also I saw, there's gentrification that happens where like an older single family home that maybe was a rental even was sold to a developer, torn down and built. So my perspective is one of, I guess for lack of a better word, being really paranoid, because we saw the neighborhoods change, and it did not do, and I think Portland backed off with they made some changes, seeing, how quickly it grew. And that's what drove us to Yachats, honestly. So I guess my advice would be go slow. I mean, pass what needs to be passed and really take time to build thoughtful code. Because granted, there you might be folks that are willing to build a structure, run it under what an ROI would be, but take the time with us, and I think a lot of the community would maybe take a breath if they saw the planning commission say, you know what, we're going to pass what's required, and not because we're kicking the can down the road, but because we care and we're going to listen and we're going to build a thoughtful plan, rather than let's put it up for a vote, all this divisiveness. We all see what's going on in Facebook. I have, I know folks are literally losing sleep over it. And these are kind people. I'm new to Yaha, it's only 3 years, but I haven't experienced this level of like, I don't know, divisiveness. We're like a tiny microcosm of what's happening in our world. And I just don't think it has to be that way when we really are fortunate that we could slow it down, Bobby, that we could say, hey, Planning Commission, pass what's required and let's really do this right. We have an opportunity to really take our time and do what's right here. And I didn't mean to get on a soapbox, but I love Yachats. I love the people here. And I just,
So we
That,
have
that's all.
1 minute left, really quick. And thank you. And I'm not trying to cut you off, just
No,
trying to
it's
keep
fine.
us
I
on
got a
time.
little winded.
You
If
did
I,
say something though that caught my attention, and I do want you
okay.
to see if you have any answer to it. You said there are towns that have creative solutions. Do you have towns that you can point us into looking at what those creative solutions were?
Well, that kind of came from, was it Ashland that you mentioned or someone
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that I could do some research with that, but I'm sure you guys have done a bunch of research. I'm willing to look into that. But why can't we be the town where people say, "Hey, this little coastal town, why can't we be that town?"
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Nicole. Mark
Yeah.
or Catherine, do you have any closing statements you'd like to give? We are right at 4 o'clock.
Um, I think I don't disagree very much with what she was saying. I think we do want to take our time. We do want to be very careful. We have been looking at this for what is it, 4 years now that we've been working on this, and we're very slowly, carefully going through the process of creating this draft that we're working on now. And now we have spent let's see, there's been 4 community meetings. We have had what, 4 or 5 work sessions now on
Seven,
the 7 work
recently,
sessions
just recently.
on the draft.
Mhm.
And just to review the draft, we haven't even really even started talking about what sort of changes we want to make to the draft. And the promise that Craig, Bobby have made to the city is that we will take as long as it takes to finish this process. And if it takes, a year or two to finish that process, that's what we will take. There's no deadline. We're not hurrying through this. There's no pressure on anybody to finish this ahead of time. We will
Yeah,
take as long as it
I
takes.
want to kind of want to just add to that. We, as a planning commission, just really got this in our hands. We have heard from the Cascadia partners. We've been given presentations by the Cascadia partners. We just got this draft to really start looking at it and making sure that it fits Yachats. And I think these conversations are, I'll say it again, very valuable to hear what you guys are thinking and saying as we are going through it. It's been a long process. We've been given something, and now this is the time that we are really trying to work through it and understand it, and make sure that the community understands it, and make sure we are doing the right thing. And we will take our time with the process, and if it means even more time than it seems on the forefront, then we will. It's people ask, when is this going to happen? And I don't know. I don't know. It's going to there's theoretic timelines that could happen, but it all bases off the discussions that take place and how long those discussions take place. We only can really talk about this as a group when we're in our planning commission meetings, either a regular session or a work session. And we have scheduled a lot of extra work sessions, but generally those are once a month. And so, yeah, just please stay tuned and please be patient with us. And please know that what we have right now is not the final piece at all. And we do care. We all care. Do you have anything else, Mark, before we
No,
hit
I think that's a good
the
summary.
conclusion?
Bobby, maybe quick plug for our next,
Mhm.
I
Oh,
think our
yes, thank
schedule's a
you.
little different next week, and
Yes, well,
then I'm gonna hit
tomorrow
the
we
big red
have
leave button.
infrastructure. Tomorrow we're going to have Lynn West, our chair of the Public Works and Streets Committee, as well as Rick McClung and Dave Buckwald, city staff leads for our water and wastewater department, that will be joining the conversation to talk all things infrastructure. And then next week, we will be back on Thursday and Friday at 3 p.m. The following on August 12th, we are doing a Wednesday instead of a Thursday because we have a conflicting city meeting at the Thursday mark. So thank you all very much. And we are going to conclude today's meeting, and we'll see some of you tomorrow, I'm sure. Have a great day.